Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Prakash Pereira. The coronavirus pandemic is forcing global companies to diversify their manufacturing away from China to other emerging and frontier markets. This pivot became particularly urgent since the outbreak of COVID-19 wreaked havoc on China-based supply chains, exposing the world's overdependence on China. The supply shock has hit corporate revenues hard due to lost output, sparking a recession. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze why the world wants to move away from China and can it be done. Joining me on the program today are Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, Center for East Asian Studies, JNU, Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador, and Subhomoy Bhattacharjee, consulting editor of the Business Standard. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you first. So why are governments around the world so concerned about this entire dependency on China?
Well, as simple as this, that one fine morning, governments have woken up to find that there is so much of over-dependence on China for critical supplies that they have ended up giving China a coercive handle, and which China is using merrily. Let me illustrate. Today, USA, for example, is dependent on China for 93% of its API imports, active pharmaceutical ingredients, and that is a lifeline. India, which is one of the hubs of pharmaceutical hubs, we are dependent on China for more than 60% of our API supplies. And and this just, whether it is health care, whether it's food security, whether it is telecom, a variety of sectors, minerals, the dependence, over-dependence is such that can really complicate matters when push comes to shove. And China has demonstrated, they had hinted. I still remember the 4th March article by Xinhua, which had hinted that if China were to do what should be done or could to retaliate, USA will be in a soup. So, and not only that, China is not a market economy. Let's understand that. The biggest mistake that was committed, I think, with hindsight, was that 2001 China was admitted to WTO. They don't play by the rules. The world plays by the rules. China laughs the way to the bank, and plus has a coercive power. So, I mean, this is absolutely untenable. And economic consideration can no longer be the sole consideration for determining where industrial units will be located.
Okay, all right, Professor, let me bring you in now. So, there is this sense from Australia to America that there is an over-dependence on China, and this is being talked about openly by heads of states too in several of the countries. How are the Chinese looking at all of this?
I think the Chinese are also under siege because the IMF estimates that China will grow at around 1.2% this year, although Oxford Economics suggested they will grow at around 4.2%, which is a very exaggerated estimate because their PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, has fallen in April. While it has a slight edge in March, it crashed in February before to nearly about 40.64 points. Now it is around 50 odd points, slightly below the water level, emergence level. To that extent, I think they're also kind of worried because there are so many things which are still not above the water level. For instance, the unemployment rate generally is estimated around 6 to 7%, which is pretty high. But other scholars, researchers estimate to about 24% unemployment. That's about 70 million unemployed in China. For China, this is very important because this translates directly into social stability and possibly even Communist Party stability. Because there are murmurs within the Communist Party. Wang Qishan, who was a close aide of Ren Zhiqiang, the real estate tycoon, he was put in jail for calling President Xi as the new emperor wearing new clothes, emperor wearing new clothes. So there are so many problems for China. The GDP is going down because of the lockdown and the restrictions on social movements, supply chains, and others. Secondly, the unemployment rate is increasing. Thirdly, the food, beverage industry, retail sector, and the tourism sector have fallen substantially, according to various estimates. There are now so all-round problem in the manufacturing and non-manufacturing sector. So China itself is trying to revive some of those supply chains, but it is a tall order for this year at least, which means that they have to then address the issues through more political aspects. That is what the response is towards the US, Australia, because they are all trying to ask about the origins of the COVID-19, which is a political issue because that means investigation into these Wuhan Institute of Virology, which also then means China suspecting that this could lead to problems about compensation, reparations. As you know, some have argued for nearly $6.5 trillion compensation, or the Germans have suggested over $200 billion. Because this is also a historical issue for China, as they demanded reparations from Japan in the historical times, 1930s. So this becomes a political issue for China as well. If they allow all this investigation to happen in the COVID-19 origins.
Okay, all right, Subhomoy. So, what is the crux of the issue really? I mean, is it disruption of supply chains? Is it that governments themselves want to ensure that they become manufacturing hubs, leaving China by the wayside, or what is it really?
What the problem that comes along is that China sort of seem to forget that it is not just an upstart, but a second largest piece of the world economy, and had to play, as Ambassador was pointing out, by the rules of the market economy. You cannot take the chance that a pandemic or any disruption of this sort will come and say that, I'm a country like any other country and I'm dealing with it. When you're the world's supplier of first choice, second choice, you got to have your systems running perfectly without any disruption. And that is what China seems to have forgotten, and that is what the world is holding it to account. But having held it to account, the problem that comes along is that China is too big a part of the world economy to be sort of ignored in the race to develop alternatives. And this is where none of the other countries are in a position to be able to afford a blueprint of what can be the alternative. India, for instance, is in a very strong position in terms of saying that I can offer some of the alternatives. But do we have the scale even right now to do it? It'll take time. The countries of Asia together, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, a lot of these countries could come together to create an alternative, but that is something that will have to be worked out. In that case, an architecture like the RCP that is being talked about, which has again sent out an invitation for India to join, will have to be redrawn and rethought. So essentially, the point of shifting manufacturing from outside China to diversify the risks, that is what the world is sort of saying, needs to see who are the competing claimants. I was listening to the European Commission. The European Commission's point is that China is, taking advantage of Europe. It's sort of inviting itself in, but it's not allowing Europe to be invited back. Now, that's a fair enough point. And India also has got the same gripe about China. But do the countries disparate which they are, have the ability to sort of cohere into one clear alternative structure. Because what is essentially going to happen is, right now, if countries want to move out from the Chinese sphere, the import bill for most countries will rise substantially. China took advantage of the fact that it was providing goods cheap. So if the countries and most of the emerging economies have to therefore source from other places, goods will not come cheap. That, on top of the fact that we are entering the stiffest recession in the last 100 years, makes it a very costly thought and a possibility to counter and to understand and to take account of. Do the countries have the ability to handle this sort of a recessionary, this sort of a cost impact?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Let me just add to that, Ambassador. I know you want to come in on what Subhomoy is saying, but let me also add to that. Now, China, let's not forget, taking the point that Subhomoy was making forward, is the world's second largest economy with a massive political clout as well. So, considering all of that, is it going to be easy to keep China at bay?
Well, you're right. It will not be easy. But what is the choice? Can we allow this economic blackmail to continue? You know, the fact is today that China has hooked the world onto a opiate or a narcotic, if I were to say, of cheap goods. So the choice is very simple. Either we remain lulled by that narcotic, keep on doing that and leave ourselves vulnerable, or at least in the critical sectors, important sectors, strategic sectors, start a decoupling. Now, we were speaking to a Chinese scholar, important Chinese scholar based in Beijing just a week ago. And he affirmed 2 points. One, that over the last 1 year, high-tech decoupling has been happening big time. A few years ago, that was not even thinkable. Secondly, we all agree that in the short or immediate term, it'll further lead to a supply shock if there is a disengagement with China. But it has to be a gradual process. And if the world does it gradually, builds shorter supply chains, regional supply chains, enhances its own capabilities, and yes, Mr. Bhattacharjee made a very important point, which I fully endorse, that plurilateral FTAs will become that much more important. So a combination of these factors will certainly help in reducing dependence on China, and will also in the bargain force China to play, at least be more mindful of the rules of the game.
Okay, all right. So, Professor, with the lockdown now in effect from all across the world, China seems to be back to normal. Factories have opened even in Wuhan and other places as well. So it seems like they already have a head start, and now everybody else will have to play catch up.
On the periphery, it seems to be like that, but there is they did say that there are zero number of cases or zero casualties, etc. But there are asymptomatic cases that have come up, and also they have suddenly hiked up the death rates in Wuhan by over 50%. So it all depends on the statistics. And Chinese statistics are notorious from that point of view. So we have to wait and watch. None of those indicators will obviously. Supposing if you have an order for December, January, you got to deliver those for the global market, which the Chinese have not been able to do so far. So even the backlogs have not been fulfilled. So number one, if we assume that there is a resumption of productivity, etc., then they would have supplied to the global vendors. That has not been done so far. So that is one indicator. The second is the social mobility is still restricted in many places. And obviously the workers would feel, why should they go to these factories if they have to, if they get the infection. The chances of infection are very high. So there is that hedging done by the local people as well. So to that extent, we do not know exactly whether those relaxed restrictions, etc. From April 8th, Wuhan has been opened up. The other major cities have also been opened up. So we have to see. In Shanghai, the schools and colleges have been opened, but now there is a view that they should be shut down because of the infections, etc. So it is still in a flux, the situation. As of now, the indicators are that they have not been able to resurrect the economy and the confidence levels among the people. So to that extent, I think it is fair to say we have to wait and watch for the next quarter, the second quarter, because the first quarter had seen a dip of nearly 6.8% in the GDP figures. So that means you have to really rebound. You probably have to, double up the kind of work that has been done. Some sectors are really doing well. The e-commerce platforms, they are doing really well. The Alibaba, Tencent, Taobao, Qingtung, these are doing well because those are the recent additions to the Chinese economic growth rates. But the other core sectors are still problematic because the demand domestically as well as internationally still is at a very low level. Automobile sales have not picked up. The other manufacturing units are also still problematic. So because of the domestic demand, which is true with every other country actually. So we have to wait and watch, and whether they will able to reverse this trend. There is pressure on the Communist Party to restore production. In fact, that has been the main aim on January 21st when they put up that joint prevention center under the State Council. Over 40 documents have been released. Policy options have been made, especially in epidemic control, in economic production in other areas, logistic support, supply chains to be open, agriculture production, so on and so forth. But we'll have to wait and watch. In many areas, like in agriculture, for instance, the pork production has actually crashed. 116% inflation, 116% increase in the pork prices, which is a staple diet in China. Of course, last year there is a 40% decline in piggery because of the African swine flu. So this is the restaurants are relatively closed. Not many people are joining. Cinema theaters are still problematic. The other retail sectors are also problematic. So we'll have to wait and watch, see how the response from the public generally is. Of course, everybody is working from home, so those IT sectors and service sectors are doing relatively better. Sure. Electronics and others.
Okay, so basically the picture that is being painted for us from China is very different to what the reality is what you're suggesting, and we'll have to wait and see and wait and watch what the exact picture, how the exact picture really emerges. Will we see that? Still remains to be seen, of course. All right, Subhomoy, is there a need for like-minded nations then to collaborate? Maybe we need to see an easing of regulations if we have to see the world move away from China.
I would say rather we'll have to construct regulations. Let me put it this way. I track the energy sector. In the energy sector, as the OPEC cartel continued to fleece the rest of the world, it was very difficult for the rest of the world to come together with a coherent strategy to be able to counter the impact of OPEC. In fact, now, as the OPEC has sort of got unbundled and collapsed, different countries are picking up pieces and to the best of their, strength, bargaining strength, and striking a deal. So it doesn't, in fact, there's quite a bit of chaos all around in the energy market. And it is basically, I'm highlighting this to illustrate the point the world's record in terms of being able to work out a plurilateral structure, much as I agree with the ambassador's point of view, isn't very strong. For instance, one of the forums where this thing should be discussed is G20. It is coming up, but from the position papers that is coming out, there is a lot of discussion on COVID. There isn't much of discussion on this replacement of China's hegemonistic sort of position. And for obvious reasons, as you yourself said in your remarks, the fact that it is too big a cog in the world economy for the rest of the world to take a position. Remember, the USA, even before the pandemic started, had started talking about protection and isolation for itself for its own reasons. So there's no reason why the rest of the world should actually believe that the big guys are working in terms of a structure which is going to be beneficial for everybody as an alternative structure. This is something that's worth remembering, that China is a devil. Is it the known devil, and is there an unknown devil that we are going to raise? Now, another point here, which is China definitely coming out of this pandemic, as the professor was pointing out, is not going to be the same China. The inflation numbers and others all make it very clear that China is going to be hugely raising its savings rate, which means China's ability, the e-commerce companies, to be the powerful hegemon that they were, will not be that anymore. The buying capacity of the Chinese is definitely going to be far less because they don't have a savings network. Even the sort of network rudimentary that we have in India, even that is not available. What does that mean? That means that the companies there will be, the e-commerce companies there will be far less able to finance and control the financial architecture of the rest of the world.
Right.
So that is another aspect that needs to be sorted out, because the payment structure that is coming up in this world was again largely getting dominated by the Chinese Alibaba and the Alipays. That will need to be reworked. So there are several moving parts which are coming up. One of the things that is clear is that every country is going into protectionism. Right. Globalization is on the retreat. Countries are raising whatever the costs, their ability to manufacture within their borders. And this is going to be a trend going ahead, no doubt about it. Whether this trend is going to be a large concerted effort of countries coming together, I think it's too early to even think on those lines. But definitely it is going to be a much more disaggregated pieces all over the place.
All right, time now to get closing comments with the best way forward from all my panelists, starting first with you, Ambassador. Can we see India and maybe the ASEAN countries coming together, maybe some cooperation from countries from the Far East as well, to try and deal with this particular issue?
India and ASEAN will be yes and no, because ASEAN countries, some of them at least, are dependent on China also. But let me respond to your very valid question about the like-minded group, and that is what I have been thinking about also. The situation today is that not only China has subjected the world to this horror, which has already snuffed out 235,000 lives, but is also wanting to change the narrative. Look at the audacity that they want to get a pat on the back. UN Security Council is ineffective. G20 has become a talk shop. So and you have to basically, let me clarify, nobody wants to snap relations with China. Nobody wants to contain China. But China has to become a responsible member. So the way out perhaps is that like-minded countries, as you put it, or Quad plus plus. And I can think that, about 9 or 10 countries, Quad plus France, Germany, Vietnam, New Zealand, Indonesia, possibly 1 or 2 other countries, which have a common agenda, which are democracies, can get together and start asking questions. So even if these countries start asking questions, that will form a nucleus for the others to join, and China will not be able to ignore it. You cannot give a free run to China. That, I think, is a lesson that the world has to draw.
All right, Professor?
I think the India has to come out quickly with some policy announcements. We did see Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister had announced a few things with over 100 American companies, but this is only a tactical kind of posturing. We need to see at the Government of India level clear policy kind of directions, and what do we do in terms of post-lockdown situation in terms of production resumption, as well as on the new industries that have to be given. One is obviously we have had some leeway in terms of Skill India development, Digital India, and other campaigns. This has to be dovetailed into those packages, but some bold announcements have to be made, which of course have also been in consideration recently with the new announcements made. But that has to be given a more concerted view. I do agree that there is the Indo-Pacific, which was focusing mainly on political issues or maritime issues. There is then a need for also acquiring an economic aspects in that format. And then there is G20, which needs also to be discussing issues on the problems that they are facing right now. China did had this ban on rare earth metals with Japan in 2003. So China did use trade as a weapon before. So one has to wake up to this prospect that in future we're going to have some of these issues lingering.
Okay, all right. And Subhomoy, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Well, I suppose the immediate resolution of the South China Sea issue would give an indication of how far the countries are willing to take on China. And if the countries waver, then obviously you realize that it will take quite a bit more for the sort of un-Chinization of the world manufacturing setup to happen. But definitely there is going to be, and is already visible, a lot of local production happening around. How far that will impact the economy of the world is for us to see. It will be costlier, but it is something that is looking inevitable as of now.
Okay, all right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.